There are two distinct types of teachers: those who go the extra mile for their students and those who fall short. The first group willingly invests extra time to help struggling students, offering a sympathetic ear for personal problems and taking pride in their students' accomplishments without seeking recognition. They make sure their students know that their achievements are their own and that the teacher is merely guiding them along the way. In contrast, those in the second group do the bare minimum to collect their paycheck, lack patience with struggling students, and often let them sink rather than help them. This lack of understanding and empathy can be detrimental to students and to the education system as a whole. But there is a limit to everything, and the teacher we are going to tell you about today exceeded it by committing a serious mistake from which he will never be able to escape. Our story takes place in Russia, specifically in a small and remote public school on the outskirts of Moscow, where Sergei Volkov had been teaching English to his students for more than 20 years. However, he will not be the real protagonist of our story, although he will be a very important part of it. The protagonist of the story and the real heroine of whom everyone has heard by now is an 8-year-old girl, Nadia Petrova. Nadia had been a student of Mr. Volkov's for almost 2 years when her parents decided to move to Moscow and changed her school, forcing her to leave behind her life in St. Petersburg, along with all her friends. The change of scenery had not gone well for the girl, who had an extremely reserved character that added to the learning difficulties she had been having for a couple of years, only worsened her adaptation and her academic results. No one is not less intelligent than the rest of his peers. On the contrary, I am sure she possesses a brilliant mind that will exploit her potential with the right training. She just needs patience, a good teacher to guide her and understand that she goes at a different pace from the rest, nothing more. These were the words that the speech therapist had told Nadia's parents shortly after the girl began to show some difficulties in learning to read and write like the rest of the children in her class. A good teacher and patience. That was all Nadia needed to stop feeling different from the rest and start improving. Unfortunately, those two things would be the only ones she would not have upon her arrival at her new school in Moscow. And that's where Mr. Volkov comes back into the picture. At her previous school, Nadia's parents had arranged for her teacher to tailor a curriculum to suit her needs. However, that all came to an end when she arrived in Mr. Sergei's English language and literature class. The man was a living hell and all the children knew it. However, being one of the longest-serving and best qualified teachers in the area, none of the complaints the parents lodged against him had any effect. Sergei was famous for his teaching methods in which understanding, patience, and kindness were nowhere to be found. He was strict, too strict, even aggressive. All the teachers knew that when shouting was heard from the hallway, it was probably one of his classes, and yet no one dared to take the opposite to him. The regime of fear. That was his method, and no child seemed to be able to run away from it. None, except Nadia. As we have already said, Nadia came to Mr. Volkov's class with serious learning difficulties, especially for writing and language comprehension, which were the subjects that the teacher had relentlessly taught for more than 20 years. Since she had started studying with him, her results had only gotten worse, not to mention her attitude and her ability to relate to the rest of the children. The other teachers tried to help her, but when it was Volkov's turn, all their efforts were wasted. Sergei's classes were insufferable for all the children, but especially for Nadia, who felt a certain resentment towards him for learning more slowly than the rest. "I can't stand lazy children, and I don't tolerate stupid children in my class either. You got it," he shouted at his students on numerous occasions, sowing panic among children as young as 7 and 8 years old. The children dreaded the moment when the teacher would walk through the door and bring order to the classroom. The laughter, the games, The conversations disappeared completely when Professor Volkov arrived. And if that wasn't enough, the teacher had the curious and illegal habit of recording all his classes. He insisted that he recorded them to know where he needed to improve and to better control the weaknesses of his students. But the truth is that he liked to see how he made the children suffer. Whenever he arrived in the classroom, he would place a small camera at the end of the class, which he would pick up and put in his briefcase at the end of the lesson. Every day he did the same thing. Watching how he terrified everyone gave him a sick pleasure that no one seemed to be able to put an end to. Until the day came when everything changed, and the regime of silence and submission he had established ended up exploding. It all happened one afternoon when the teacher had pulled Nadia in front of the board and was trying to teach her the English words for you and I. "Nadia, look at me. These are two very simple words, the most basic ones in the dictionary. Repeat after me. Come on," shouted the teacher, getting dangerously close to the girl. Nadia was blocked, in shock. Like all the previous times, that teacher had forced her to expose herself in this way, despite being well aware of her problems. Nadia didn't seem to understand what the teacher was trying to tell her, but instead of explaining it calmly, the teacher started yelling the lesson very close to her face. He did it over and over again. I could tell that the girl was feeling very uncomfortable and that she was suffering. The humiliation was unbearable. Not only did the girl have to put up with the shouting of the teacher, a person who was only dedicated to humiliating her and making her feel worthless, but she also did it in front of the whole class. No child wants to be yelled at by a teacher in front of her classmates. It can be very annoying and extremely embarrassing. This type of scolding can scar a child, especially when it comes to children with learning difficulties like Nadia. When things like this happen, the child will not want to go to the front of the class when called upon in the future. Eventually, the child may completely lose his thirst for knowledge and his love of learning, something Nadia had already been experiencing for a long time, and since she had arrived at that school, it had only gotten worse. It is very likely that if the teacher had stopped yelling at the girl for a second and calmly explained to her what he needed her to know, Nadia would have been able to understand the lesson, but instead he yelled, "Come on, answer me! Say something, damn it! It's not that hard!" The professor continued shouting, getting more and more angry. It is impossible for a girl to learn anything under such circumstances. The teacher should have known better, but some people should not be allowed to become teachers, and Mr. Sergei Volkov is one of them. But the worst was yet to come. The situation goes from being very unpleasant to outright violent when the teacher starts trying to teach the girl the English word for you. He started repeating the word to her non-stop, very close to her face and raising his voice higher and higher. You! Come on, Nadia, tell me something," shouted Volkov. The girl had reached her limit. She no longer understood anything and seemed not to be listening to anything the teacher was saying, or, rather, shouting at her. It was then that things got much worse. The teacher lost control. Suddenly, as the girl was unresponsive and had chosen to lower her head and stare at the floor while enduring his screams, the teacher began to hit her on the head. With each blow, he was showing her that the word "you" referred to her. But Nadia remained unresponsive, unmoving. But that didn't stop him. Sergei kept hitting her in the head and yelling louder and louder. It was usual to see this man angry, but that day far surpassed any previous tantrum. He was getting angry and would pay dearly for it. Finally, when it seemed that Nadia was going to succumb and run out of the classroom in tears, something in her woke up, acting in a way that was totally unexpected, even for her. The last blow to the head was too much for the girl, who had enough of enduring and decided to give him back all the pain he had caused her. Quickly and accurately, Nadia lifted her right leg and gave a strong kick in the groin to the teacher, who fell to the ground, doubling over in pain as she ran away from him. The class erupted in jubilation, applauding the girl's bravery. Nadia, ignoring them all and ignoring the teacher's cries of pain from the floor, went to the back of the class to grab the only thing that could free them all from the man: the video camera. Nadia knew that the recordings would be her passport to freedom and that of all her classmates. The girl had difficulty learning to read or write, but she knew perfectly well that a video of a teacher behaving in such a way, with an 8-year-old pupil and a class full of terrified children watching, would be more than enough to end Sergei Volkov's career. Violence is not the answer, especially in a classroom, and we will never promote it as a means to solve problems. But, well, in defense of the girl, this teacher got violent first. He deserved it. He started hitting her in the head over and over again. Unacceptable treatment for a teaching professional that would end up having very serious consequences thanks to this girl's bravery. This is something that would never be tolerated in a school in the United States and in many other parts of the world. In most schools, there is a zero-tolerance policy for a teacher who humiliates a child in any way, for any reason. Something like that would get most teachers fired in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, in Russia, it was customary to turn a blind eye and give teachers total immunity, leaving students like Nadia totally defenseless. However, this would not be the case for Nadia. No one could look the other way and pretend nothing had happened. Professor Volkov had made a serious mistake. In fact, he had been making it for years, and he was finally going to pay for it. After stealing the camera and running out of the school, Nadia reported everything that had happened that day in class and uploaded the video to social media completely anonymously. An unprecedented heroic act, especially if we take into account that the girl was only 8 years old and had just lived a traumatic experience. After uploading the video and telling the relevant authorities everything that had happened, Mr. Volkov was immediately expelled from the school and detained by the police to testify for all his crimes committed over the years to the children he taught. In turn, the video uploaded to social networks quickly went viral, currently accumulating more than 7 million views and thousands of comments defending the children. The public rejection of hundreds of thousands of people only made it even clearer to the police what they should do with the teacher: condemn him in an exemplary way and remove him forever from the world of teaching so that no other child has to suffer the same as Nadia and her classmates. There are 2 types of teachers in the world, as mentioned above: those who care and those who do not. This story clearly demonstrates that this teacher in question did not deserve to work in any classroom, nor to have any children in his care. Patience is a key quality to being a good teacher, and this teacher showed none. He deserves to face the consequences of his actions, and perhaps this incident will ensure that he never hurts another child again. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.